Honest answers to awkward questions. With Lucy Maskell. Sponsored by Urban Saints.
That's right, you're tuned in to Premier Gospel Music for Life, and you're listening to Awkward, the show that gives honest answers to awkward questions. My name's Lucy, and I'll be with you till 7 o'clock. Aren't you lucky? Well, tonight's show is all about that scary thing called evangelism, about sharing faith, about apologetics, and I've got a very special guest with me in the studio today. We have Darren Quinnell, digital evangelist, media coordinator at Share Jesus International, and all-round awesome dude. So, Darren, please introduce yourself to the people.
Awesome dude. I think that's a wicked way of describing me. I don't know if I'm awesome, but I'm from Message to the Masses. Created it a few years ago. Great to be here to talk to you and stuff. It's awesome.
Awesome. Tell us more about Message to the Masses then. What is that?
Okay, so Message to the Masses basically is a website allowing young people to ask questions about faith. Our vision is that you'll be able to ask any question about faith and have a video answer there ready for you. So we go around filming different presenters, different people from around the country that then present the question in under 2 minutes, trying to give it a real quick and easy understanding to anyone that's watching.
Wow, that sounds awesome. I've been taking a look at the website messagetothemasses.com, and I absolutely love how you have such a variety of questions. You've got everything, haven't you? You've got stuff about God, about faith, about church, about life, really, haven't you?
We totally try and keep it diverse. At the moment, it's quite focused on the Christian basic questions, but we want to go into loads of different things like justice and baptism and bullying and sexuality. We're trying to progress to that stage, but at the moment we've got a diverse kind of load of questions.
I love it. And Darren, I was going to say, you do so many things because you're a youth worker, you are a video man, that's what I call you, and, you've got messagetomasses.com. So how do you juggle everything? Like, is Message to Masses like your baby at the moment? That's what you're working on?
Yeah, Message to Masses is my baby. I've written a book. I did youth work for a number of years. Loads of different things. At the moment I work part-time for SJI as a media coordinator, so doing all their e-updates and their videos and stuff like that. And then I'm a video editor myself, so I do the odd freelance things, but the Message to the Masses is, as you said, my baby, and I kind of put all my time into that and all my effort into that, so I travel around meeting different people and filming them and getting those questions down to under 2 minutes, which is sometimes quite a hefty task.
I love it. That's such a cool job. So tell me more about evangelism, because I think as a church, or as a Christian myself as well, I find it quite scary, sharing my faith. Like, sometimes you think people are gonna say weird things about you, or sometimes you just don't know the answer to things. So why is evangelism important to you?
Evangelism is important to me, mainly because I believe in Jesus. I believe that Jesus told us to go and evangelize and go and tell people about him, about his story, and that something happened 2,000 years ago, and that something's still happening now. I think it's important. I think that when people come to faith, they want to share their faith. It's like when you meet a boy or girl for the first time and you start a relationship. They just, people just get sick and tired of hearing about the person that they're dating, and they're so in love with them, and they're so just going on about it all the time. But it's exactly the same with Jesus. Like, we fall in love with Jesus, we meet him for the first time, we just want to spill it all out to people. And sometimes we do that creatively, sometimes we do that well, and then sometimes we get that wrong, and we make mistakes in that, and we try and pressurize people into faith. So evangelism has loads of different qualities to it, and I just think that we can do it in a way that actually that gets the message over to people, but we've got to think about it.
Definitely. Tell me a bit more about Message to the Masses then. So if you give me part one of the story, but we want to give it all away to the listeners because you got to stay tuned. Tell me part one. So messagetomasses.com, you do 2-minute videos, kind of like apologetics for young people. You travel around getting young people to actually film the answers, don't you? Is that right?
Yeah, so we normally approach youth workers and youth organisations, and if they have interns or youth in their youth groups, then we kind of arrange a time that's best suited for the youth group and have in a day like 8 people filming, normally doing like two questions each, and we go away with 16 different videos, and try and get them to think about how to answer that, how their lingo and the way that they talk about the different issues affects the way that the listener is hearing it. We're not living in a Christian culture anymore.
No, we're not.
So the words that we, that talk about, or we're all talked about at church and we hear all the time, we forget that not everybody knows them. Even the word sin, people don't really.
Oh, don't like that word,
No,
Darren.
like,
Stop
they don't
saying
like
it.
that word, but people are a bit like, what is that? That doesn't make sense to me. What is sin? And that's quite simple in Christianity terms. But then when you hear about like a prayer closet or something like that, or a prayer time, and people are just like, what do you mean a prayer time?
Exactly. Coming out the closet means something different these days, doesn't it? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, totally.
Oh, coming out the closet, really?
Yeah.
No.
It's very bizarre. So you get all these different things, and something that I learned a few years ago is that the disciples were going through it as well. When they started out, people thought that we were a whole load of cannibals because we drunk blood and we ate someone's body.
Yeah.
And obviously that's communion, but like they didn't know, they didn't realize that was symbolic and of Jesus dying on the cross and stuff. So we forget that people don't know those type of things within Christianity.
Well, thank you very much for sharing your wisdom there, Darren. I think it's really important, like you said, about speaking different language. I think, for me, that's what evangelism is, about sharing your faith, missionary stuff. It's about, like, being on someone's level, be able to relate to that person. It's about relationship, isn't it? It's about,
totally.
Like you found this amazing treasure, like Jesus, and you want to share with people. And that sounds a bit corny, but it's actually about speaking different languages. We're fluent in different cultures, fluent in different spheres of influence. So anyway, we're going to come back after a few songs, but I want to hear where you are, where you're listening. If you're listening right now in London, you're listening, abroad in Africa, Europe, America, tweet me at Premier Gospel. Let me know your experience with evangelism. Do you find it easy? Do you find it hard? Does your church get involved a lot with reaching out to the community, reaching out to neighbours? Tweet me at Premier Gospel, let me know. Here are some other ways you can get in touch.
Call 020 7316 0101. Text Gospel to 66777 or tweet at Premier Gospel.
That's right, you're listening to Premier Gospel Music for Life, the show that gives you honest answers to awkward questions. You're listening to Awkward with me, Lucy, till 7 o'clock. And my special guest, Darren Quinnell from MessageToTheMasses.com, is in the studio with us. So, Darren?
Hello.
How you doing? You alright?
All right, yeah, I'm doing okay.
Brilliant. Well, I would love to hear more about the story behind MessageToTheMasses.com. Tell us more, what happened?
Well, basically, a few years ago, I was evangelizing, I was going to different youth groups, I was speaking, I was seeing young people come to faith, but then there was something missing, and basically it was that the after effect, the thing that was happening afterwards when people came to faith, they kind of just then went back into their normal everyday lives, and I just started realizing that there was this gap, really, that we just weren't focusing on as a church, and that's follow-up. And the church uses that term as the word that obviously follows up young people coming to faith, or anyone coming to faith, which allows them to go from making that decision about Jesus into a community of faith believers like the church and people around them, and actually becoming disciples. What was happening is that people were coming to faith, they were hearing about Jesus, they were realizing that it was something that they wanted to give their life to and make a step forward, so they did that, and then afterwards that was it. There wasn't really anything there for them, and sometimes there was youth workers in place and sometimes there wasn't, and I just kind of saw this massive gap, basically, where just young people were falling away from this decision that they had made, just because it was going to the back of their minds. It wasn't staying at the forefront of their minds.
So what was your amazing idea?
Well, so the thought was basically that we would start to create resources and create ways for them to directly be followed up. So that was with the start of the website, what we're launching in a month or so time is that we're launching profiles. Young people will be able to sign up and create their own profiles and have their testimony online, so they can actually remember and be encouraged to remember why they believe what they believe and what they started this journey, what they started this journey for. But also we're releasing profiles for churches as well, so they can manage and help their young people. So basically the idea came from how young people come to faith, maybe at a residential or a festival or something at the beginning of the summer. The problem is they come to faith at that summer, and then the youth workers, they normally retire for a bit for the summer. They tend to take a break. There's not normally youth programs in place after a summer festival.
It's like till September, right?
Yes. So when there's not a program in place, what do those young people do? They come back to maybe families that aren't of faith, and they get questioned, they get challenged, they get asked different things, and they don't know how to answer those questions. And the thing that the church tends to do, and what we tend to do as Christians, is that we tend to go, okay, here it is, this is the gospel, believe in Jesus, step forward.
Yeah.
People step forward, but that's all they know. All they know is that they've made a decision, they've heard about this guy called Jesus, and that's all that they know and have the knowledge of. As I said, we're not living in a Christian world, so they don't have the background of Christianity in their heads. So basically all they go home with is this knowledge of that this guy called Jesus seems cool.
Yeah,
And
but then
that's
there's nothing like you said, foundation follow-up. I mean, they're like spiritual babies, right?
Yeah, totally. And that's actually the term that we use. We Hebrews talks about this loads, about how we're babies at first when we come to faith. And I started to have this picture in my head of actually you wouldn't bring a baby home, which you're supposed to comfort and love and everything. You wouldn't bring them home and just slam them in the middle of the lounge and go, right, there's the kitchen, upstairs is the bathroom, I'll put some music on, but
Here
you
you go,
get on
love.
with it. Yeah, basically, here it is, that's it. We wouldn't do that. We'd have social services on our doorstep.
You would.
And so, but the church tends to do it. We tend to produce these babies. We tend to love producing babies. We want to see the numbers coming through the doors of the churches. We want to see people coming to faith all the time, but we're not actually willing to do the grunt work afterwards.
The discipleship, like they call it. Yeah.
We do the discipleship. We have discipleship programs in place, but we don't necessarily have discipleship programs that necessarily hit and impact people straight after they've come to faith.
Mm-hmm.
And so what happens is that decision of coming to faith kind of just falls back to the back of their minds and doesn't stay at the forefront of their minds, and so they forget. It just becomes something that they did. It just becomes a moment that they did. It doesn't become a life-changing event because they don't have the knowledge of it. And so Basic Message to Masses is starting to and wants to produce a way of directly helping people after they come to faith. So we started that with the questions, so to help young people when they don't know necessarily the gospel, and they don't know necessarily the questions that surround all the theology that we've had 2,000 years to think of, and how people in our as Christians as they've grown up had time to wrestle with. It
Like, what
them.
kind of questions do you have on your website? Let's say I haven't heard of messagetothemasses.com. Like, what kind of questions do you have there?
We have loads of different things. So from the basics of like, what is worship? What is prayer? What is evangelism? Why go to church? How often should I go to church? Isn't faith just a crutch? Doesn't science and God contradict? Who was Jesus? What was Jesus like? All those different type of questions. And some are really basic. We have one on there that's how old was Jesus? And it just talks about actually like the knowledge that we know of how old was Jesus when he died, or what did he
actually preach, or did Jesus really respect women? Those kind of questions.
Those type of questions.
Everyday questions. Yeah.
Like, does God believe in justice? Is what happens when suffering takes place? Where is God when it hurts? All those type of questions are on there to kind of help, but they can be really simple, but they can also be really heavy and diverse questions.
Brilliant. Well, thank you for giving a lowdown of the story behind Message to the Masses. So if you're listening online or London DAB Radio or wherever you are in the world, log on to messagetothemasses.com, all one word. You can follow Message to the Masses on Twitter by @MassesSpeakOut. Is that right? Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Masses Speak
Darren
Out, yeah.
didn't look, that's sure there, no. At Masses Speak Out, I have a link on the Twitter page on Premier Gospel. So if you follow us at Premier Gospel, you'll see the link there. But in the meantime, I want to hear from you. You're a bit shy today. So comment on facebook.com/Premier Gospel. Let me know your experience with asking questions. Do you think the church is more concerned with numbers at festivals than they are at follow-up? Or do you think we're doing a great job of evangelism within the church and young people? Let me know. This is how you can get in touch.
Call 020 7316 0101. Text gospel to 66777 or tweet at Premier Gospel. Awkward. Honest answers to awkward questions. With Lucy Maskell. Sponsored by Urban Saints.
That's right. You're listening to Premier Gospel Music for Life. Awkward, the show that gives honest answers to awkward questions. This is Lucy here with you till 7 o'clock. And if you just tuned in, where have you been all my life? I have Darren Quinnell in the studio from messagetothemasses.com, a youth apologetics video website. And we're talking about evangelism, which is quite scary. So Darren, there's a lot of things that prevent young people from sharing their faith, whether they're a new Christian or they've grown up in a Christian family. What are the obstacles?
Well, biggest one, I suppose, is got to be fear. Fear is always the biggest one, because the devil loves to just, tell us that we're no good, tell us that we're rubbish, and basically we're just fearful. So normally whenever I've had conversations with people about faith, I'm always worried about it, and then when I have a conversation with them, I'm just blown away by the openness of them and how they're so receptive to what I'm saying.
Okay.
But not just that, we forget that people are spiritual. And that people believe in loads of different things, and it can be as simple as believing in a ghost in a haunted house or something like that, or believing that
he's behind you.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. That's spiritual. That's being spiritual, and we forget that people are looking, and that there's something in us that needs a spiritual desire.
Yeah.
And so we're all searching. We're all looking for it. I think what happens is that we fall into a trap where we tend to say that this is the way, this is the truth, and we want to say that, and we kind of know that in the back of our mind, but when we kind of get a bit forceful about it, people can kind of not want to know more because they just feel like they're being pressured.
So what do you mean by that? What do you mean by kind of being forced and pressured? How do you think we should share our faith?
Well, sometimes sharing our faith, we want to communicate Jesus so much, and there's nothing wrong with that. We're passionate about Jesus. We want to tell people about Jesus. We're worried about what people are doing in their lives and where they're going to end up, and all those different things. Heaven and hell comes into it all. Just loads of different issues that make us want to share and talk about Jesus. But the problem is that we can get so passionate that we forget to shut up sometimes.
Yes.
And we get we end up moving into the areas of pressurizing people, and what we tend to do, and what we try to do with Message to the Masses, is make it so that it's people trying to find their faith rather than being told their faith, and people trying to find their belief rather than being told what to believe. And what we tend to do is we tend to hear different preachers, and we hear different people talking up at the front, but there's no actual time for discussion. There's no time to actually wrestle with what's being said. And so what we tend to do is just hear about it, and then take that as gospel.
It's kind of you're feeding me something, but actually I haven't chewed it over. I've just swallowed it.
Totally.
Yeah, fair
totally.
enough. Yeah.
And what we do, we tend to swallow it straight away, and then we go out and we talk to our friends, and we think this is the way, this is the truth, and this is what we should be talking about and saying about. And then a few years later, we might actually think about it again and hear a different take on it and go, actually that makes more sense. And so suddenly our theology's changed a little bit. Not that our theology's changed on Jesus.
Now, what's the most important thing then for you? If we don't get all theological about it, what's the most important thing for you as a basis?
For me, when it comes to sharing about Jesus, and when it comes to my faith, I believe in God the Father, I believe in Jesus the Son, and I believe in the Holy Spirit.
Oh, Trinity.
Yeah, whole Trinity thing. But outside of that, I think that theology changes. I think if we look back over 2,000 years, our theology has changed. It's adapted with what we've learned. We've found new evidence for things. We've found out new things, and we've had to kind of change our ways of thinking. And we had not to go with culture and to kind of go with the flow of what culture is, but we've kind of had to make or find more understanding about what culture is actually asking and actually answering questions about what culture is going through at the moment.
Yeah, for example, like the Noah film that came out this week.
Yeah.
You know, if you're listening back on the podcast, you'll know about Noah, Russell Crowe film. So I've had some interesting chats online and offline about that, haven't you, as well, Darren? Darren and I have gone to see a preview screening, which was really interesting. So tell me more about about Noah and how it relates to evangelism at the moment. As a digital evangelist.
First and foremost, like, again, Christians are just getting out, like, throwing all their toys out their prams, and it is a bit sad. Like, we did this a few years ago when Rob Bell released his book Love Wins. People were commenting on that loads and loads and loads and they hadn't even read it, and the same kind of things going with Noah. People are commenting on it and talking about it and getting really offended by it. And yes, there is loads of different theology within there. There's not just Bible references, but there's stuff taken from Islam. There's stuff taken from Jews.
Gnosticism, Kabbalah,
all
spirituality.
And what they've tended to do is they've tended to draw on all the different aspects of the Noah story, of where we found evidence for the Noah story, and used that. But I would say personally that the biblical side of it really comes out. There's a spoiler alert, but like there is a bit in it where Noah recounts the story of creation. And what I think personally, and what we need to do more as the church, is that the story mirrors the story of the Bible, but it also mirrors what people think from the point of evolution.
Okay.
So what it does is that Russell Crowe, as Noah, he tells the story of creation just as Genesis talks about it.
Yes.
He speaks it in the way as if you're actually reading it. But the imagery is done in a way that is kind of like evolution. And so it shows in a time-lapse kind of
it's like a
format.
montage, isn't it? It's amazing.
It's like really quick, really fast. Now, for me, I wasn't there. Like, I don't know how creation started.
You would have a pretty massive beard and lots of candles on your birthday cake.
Yes, if I was there, exactly. I would be very old.
He hasn't got a beard, ladies and gentlemen.
No, I don't.
Carry on.
I shaved this morning. I don't know. So then how can I have a real strong opinion on it? At the end of the day, what I do know is that, what I do believe, is that God created the world. How that happened, I don't know.
Yes.
And the word day normally comes into this as well.
The Hebrew word for day.
Yeah, we don't know whether that's a length of time or if that is actually 24 hours. Seeing that calendars probably weren't around in that time in that sense, it probably is an amount of time. But who knows? But does it? If someone believes in the whole story of creation literally happening in a click, in a second, or if it's happened over evolution, does that change the fact that God didn't create the world? No, God used it. God created it.
What about Adam and Eve? I mean, does it actually matter if Adam and Eve were real? I mean, does it matter, Darren?
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Does my salvation depend on a man and a woman in a tree?
Some people would say yes. Some people would say no. What we tend to do at Message to the Masses is what we try to do is we try and lay out all the facts on the table, and say, look, this is what we know. This is what we think. This is what people think, and you make the decision. I'm not going to tell you that Adam and Eve were definitely for real, because that's me putting my theological views on you. It's actually up to you as a person and your responsibility of your mind to think about it yourself and wrestle with these issues and take out all the evidence and the facts. So what we tend to do is we try and put all the facts on the table.
2 views, 3 views of the same issue,
whatever the views are. Maybe there's only a few views, so we just say, okay, so some people believe in this, some people believe in that. But at the end of the day,
Here's the whole picture.
This is the whole picture. And so we're not trying to, kind of cloud people's minds in that, because what will happen is that people will be challenged about this in their Christian life. So, for instance, the Adam and Eve thing, there might be unchurched people that would criticize and challenge people, young people, on that, and have evidence and knowledge of, well, what about this? How can Adam and Eve exist because of this, and everything like that? And so the young people then suddenly, like, if they've just been taught literally Adam and Eve are fact and that is true, that is the end of the line, you can't think outside the box, then they're stuck.
That's actually indoctrination, isn't it? In a way, like saying, this is how it is. God created the world in 6 days. Adam and Eve were real, and you've got to believe that. End of ABC. When actually, like you said, there's other Christians who maybe believe in evolution or intelligent design, and they've got evidence for it as well. But I also agree with you. Actually, God created the world, and again, I wasn't there, and I don't have a beard, thankfully. So I can't say what actually happened. But it's important to wrestle these questions. So I've got one more question for you before we go into some new music. So let's say I'm listening to the show and I'm a first-time listener, and I'm actually wondering, you're talking about this whole sharing faith thing with other people. What about, like, Jeremy, start with God? Like, isn't it stupid and unintelligent to believe in God? Like, how do I know God's real? Like, we are in Premier Studios right now, and we're all based on this belief that God is real, Jesus, Holy Spirit. But actually, how do I know I'm not just brainwashed?
This is true. I think what people do is that they start with the knowledge and, like, people telling them about God. But what it comes down to, I think, is actually experience, and it's actually experiencing it. You can't bottle God. You can't bottle it and sell it. And like, as much as sometimes the church tries to do that, we can't bottle it. And I've always found it weird to watch TV shows or God shows or anything like that where people are being filmed while they're worshipping, because it always looks weird, because it just looks like people are literally, hands raised in their air and that's it. And
they're like taking LSD or something, right?
Yeah, it's weird. It's weird to look. But I know from being in those experiences and being in those times that those are really really times with God that I've experienced. But you can't bottle it. That's why I don't think you can film it. I don't think people can look at it and go, there's God.
David Attenborough.
Yeah, you can't do a whole documentary type thing on it.
This is a charismatic Christian raising their hands in worship. Exactly. Let's go closer. Yeah.
And that might be quite cool to do one day.
We'll do that, okay, next week, yeah? No, carry on.
That would be quite cool. But, like, there's also loads and loads of people, like, this has lasted for 2,000 years. This hasn't been something that's just been fought up or anything like that. It's actually lasted for 2,000 years. There have been scholars that have just constantly taken it apart. There are people that are more kind of wanting to take the gospel apart more than I do. And they've ripped it apart and they've put it back together and they've tried to work it out and they've really looked at it. And they've experienced it. These are Christian people that are experiencing it and wanting to go deeper. So we can take it from the other people around us as well, not just the brainwashing side of things.
Yes, definitely. Yeah. Okay, well, thank you for sharing your thoughts, Darren. Now, I want to hear from listeners, because I know for a fact there are people listening, so get in touch. Let me know, do you think it matters, stuff like Christian evolution or Christian creationism or Adam and Eve? Does it matter whether they exist or not? Like, does that matter to follow Jesus? What about, the whole experience? Can you know Christianity is true because you've had a personal experience? Let me know your questions. I want to grill Darren tonight. So if you have any questions, literally, it could be like, isn't it stupid to believe in God? What about evidence for Jesus? What about, miracles? It could be anything. So here is how you can get in touch.
Call 020 7316 0101. Text gospel to 66777 or tweet at Premier Gospel.
But sometimes the impact isn't that, like, amazing, and sometimes, like, a lot of people have testimonies where they kind of just fell into faith. They've grown up in their faith and stuff like that, so sometimes they don't have a lightning bolt moment. So biblically, Jesus talks about it. He says that we should. In Matthew, he talks about how we should go and make disciples of the world.
Where's that?
Chapter 28.
Yeah, Matthew 28, verse 16 to 20. Check it out.
There you go. And it says about disciples, not converts, but disciples.
Yeah.
And so he says, to do it that way. Our verse that we focus around in Message to Masses is 1 Peter 3, verse 15. Sorry, getting that wrong. 1 Peter chapter 3, verse 15, which says, always be prepared to give an answer, but do it with gentleness and respect. And we've always taken that really to heart. I've heard so many times, I've been to so many different conferences and festivals and that, and heard different preachers talk about this verse, and they always quote it, and they say, always be prepared to give an answer. And that's where they stop.
Really?
Yeah. I've
Shocking.
especially in the last few years, I've obviously tried to note it down a little bit more, and I've just been like, whoa, they stop. And they never say the rest of it, and they use it as an example of why we should share our faith. We should always be giving an answer and always be doing it. But the key part of that verse is to do it with gentleness and respect.
Okay.
And that's what Jesus did. Jesus never pressurized people to believe in him. If you look at it in the Gospels, he was always going to sinners and always going to where they were at. And then when they actually talked to him and chat to him, and they gave him permission to talk into their lives, that's when he would challenge them. That's when he would push them. And he only gets angry at Pharisees, if you ever look at that.
Yeah, the Pharisees, by the way, if you're not sure who they are, they are the religious people who actually try to help ordinary people follow God's laws, but actually they end up putting more stuff on their backs, didn't they? And they're a bit selfish, like, oh, I'm amazing because I pray all this time.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. And there's a story about a rich man who came to Jesus and said, how should I get eternal life? And he says, basically, give up all your riches. And he walks away sad. Like, Jesus doesn't go after him and pressurize him and push him.
Didn't give him a track, did he?
He didn't give him a track. No, he kind of was the track, like walking around being the track. But he just let him go. And Jesus doesn't pressurize people. He loves them, and that's where it comes from. He loves them.
So relationship, like you said, having that earning that trust and respect in that person's life to speak into them. So Darren, what about your story? Maybe if you've got a story from the youth work you've done, because I know you're a youth worker as well as doing video media. Could you share a story maybe of how a young person has really wrestled with their faith and asking questions?
Yeah. I don't know about wrestling with their faith, but I've got a story where one of my young people kind of was communicating their faith and was just saying about their faith online, and didn't really actually say that much. All he did was they came back from our church weekend away, and they basically literally put on their Facebook saying, fantastic weekend away with friends and family, God is amazing. And that was it. That's all he said.
100 likes.
Yeah, well, basically what happened was that I suppose the average Facebook comment gets about 5 comments, sometimes more likes than that. He got 648 comments. This progressed and changed into a massive conversation over online.
What did they say? Who commented?
Loads of different people. Loads of his friends were a few of his friends were just like, what do you mean God's amazing? What's this about? And everything like that. What are you talking about? And he said, I've been away and done all this and been away on a weekend away and heard about God, and God's awesome and stuff. And it progressed into this conversation. Sometimes it got heated. Sometimes it calmed down. Obviously after 648 comments, you're going to have a load of diverse different comments,
and you have tired hands from typing those responses.
And totally. Ooh. Yeah, that's pretty. I never thought of that. That's a crazy thing.
So what happened? Where did the conversation lead? Were the people quite antagonistic, or were they quite interested?
Yeah, people were interested at first and stuff. Interestingly, it was actually Christians that actually caused more of the problems, because they started to get defensive about their faith. And the problem is when we're talking and doing stuff on social media, we've got to remember that the text conversation doesn't communicate emotion. And so when you're being sarcastic maybe online, if you're writing it, it doesn't sometimes come across.
It comes
sarcastic.
across literal,
it
right?
Comes across
quite harsh.
literal and stuff. And so we've got to remember that actually when someone is reading something, That's why it's never great to have conversations over text message, because
you can read into things,
you can read
right?
into things and stuff,
So
and it can
what's
change.
your view? What's your view then on sharing Jesus on social media? And as digital evangelists, we have a thing called Internet Evangelism Day.
Yeah.
Which I think is 1st of June. If you haven't heard that, just Google Internet Evangelism Day. You can see what it is. But anyway, tell me your tips, especially equipping young people in apologetics and sharing faith online. What are your top tips?
Yeah. Well, I suppose we should always be just gospeling the gospel. So, for instance, this young person that wrote this comment, all he had said was, God is amazing, and that's it. He didn't go in and say, like, okay, this is what John 3:16 says, and write it all down and put it out there and pressurize people. He just literally said a comment that was his life.
Natural, wasn't it?
Natural life,
Yeah.
And we've got to be more natural and organic online. We've got to be just talking about it more. Like, oh yeah, I went to church this weekend, it was brilliant. That's all it needs. And then that could actually spark up a conversation. That could start up a conversation. But we're doing it because we're just literally that's what's going on in our lives.
Yeah.
And we shouldn't be frightened about what is going on in our lives. So we need to be more confident about just literally writing down every time
Being
we have
natural.
a moment. Yeah.
Okay. Tip 2. Number 2.
Number 2 is not to get personal, not to get aggressive.
What do you mean by that?
By what I mean is people are going to disagree with you, and that's okay. But you can't get defensive about your faith. You need to actually understand that people, maybe don't like it,
Where they're coming from.
Yeah, where they're coming from, and trying to fit into their shoes. So that can be really hard because it's something that we believe, and sometimes we've put so much into it and our life into it, and passion as well. And sometimes passion can be a bad thing because we get too passionate that it clouds our judgment, and we want to make sure that we get over our point of view, and that our point of view is being clouded, and that Jesus is being insulted, and that, well, Jesus has been insulted, fine. The guy died on a cross.
They crucified him,
You know what I mean? Like, he's used to that.
But the greatest comeback in history, Easter.
Yeah,
so
totally.
there we go.
Yeah. So
don't take it personally.
Don't take it personally.
And don't try and be too offensive. What would you say? Try and not make it personal about them.
Yeah, I would say it's about admitting that sometimes we get it wrong, sometimes we get it right.
We don't know the answers,
and
right?
we don't know all the answers. Yeah, don't try and be that person where you know it all, and that people are are looking to you for answers. Yes, but they are absolutely fine with you not knowing the answers. What you need to do is get back to them. The worst thing you can do is say, oh, I don't know, and then that's it. Like, the best thing is that I don't know, but you know what, I'm actually curious about that, and let's find out. So yeah, all
Thanks
those
for
different
that.
things.
Thank you very much, Darren, for your top tips there on engaging with faith online and offline. So if you've got any questions that maybe you're struggling with in your faith, or maybe you had friends or family or just people at school who've asked you things and you don't know the answer to, why don't you tweet me and Darren at Premier Gospel, or Facebook us, facebook.com/Premier Gospel, or text us 66777, first word gospel plus your message 66777, and send us your questions and we can chat about them on air. And you don't have to put your name if you want to be anonymous. I want to also give a shout out to our faithful listener all the way from Kampala, Uganda. Shout out to you, Amos. I know you're a faithful listener to Awkward every week, so shout out to you. So tweet us your questions, Facebook us, and we'll chat more about evangelism after these songs.
That Christianity is just kind of dulled down a bit within people,
chilled out.
because we are so known for for evangelism.
So mainstream.
Yeah, and not just that, but this is. It's kind of like with Jehovah's Witnesses. Like, you know how they communicate.
I do,
faith.
Darren.
How do they do it? They knock on a door.
Yeah.
You know that if you get a door knocker, it's most of the time it's going to be a Jehovah's Witness. It's very rarely that it's Christian
or a Mormon,
Christian based, or a Mormon. And so you know that the way that they communicate their faith. So I think it's kind of the same thing with Christianity. You know the way that they are communicating their faith, but they do it through evangelism, through events, and through gospel events and that. The other thing with Muslim and the other thing with Hinduism and things like that is that they have symbols that kind of show who they are. So it's kind of hard for them not to talk about their faith.
What do you mean do you mean, for example, what they wear?
Yeah. So that makes a massive difference. Whereas we don't, like, apart from like the dog collar that a vicar wears,
crosses are also just a fashion, aren't they?
Crosses are just a fashion.
It doesn't mean you wear electric chair earrings.
Yeah.
Wow.
So when you speak to somebody about their faith, when you see a Muslim with their faith, you kind of know that they are a Muslim, like because of what they wear and what they commit to and stuff. Whereas with Christianity, we don't really have anything. The only thing that I can think of that we really have is on Ash Wednesday, when we're supposed to have like a bit of the ash from the crosses from the previous year put on our forehead and stuff, and that's kind of traditional and really old-fashioned and stuff. But that's the only thing that I can think that really symbolises.
It looks like you've gone into a club and just had someone put a cigarette and like singed your head the night before, isn't it?
Yeah, that's a bit weird. And the cross could have been that, and I suppose sometimes you could say that little fish symbols on people's cars and everything. As cheesy as they are, like they are something. But you're right. The cross has become something that's just every day, and I think that's the problem. It's
become so familiar.
Yeah.
So
our
how do we overcome that? How do we overcome this? Like, so how, as a youth worker, maybe you're chatting to maybe some parents who are listening in tonight. How would you overcome that apathy?
I think it's more about being real, and it's about going back to that whole talking about your faith, just generally talking about your faith, not like forcing people or pressurizing people. We need to be expecting opportunities, but not looking for opportunities.
Or controversial.
I
was saying, I've got a tweet from Carl Nova. Shout out to Carl, who does the hip-hop sessions on Wednesday night. Cool. Very cool session. So he says, I don't think passion and zeal are enough. What about compassion, understanding, and true love?
So actually, actually serving people and loving people.
Yes.
And I think that is in essence what Jesus taught. Like, in essence, that is what Jesus is about. He is about love. And the problem is, and I think the sad thing is that we don't do that enough in our faith. Like, as simple as, there are a lot of organisations and a lot of churches that want to do that. But by and all, across the country, a lot of churches are about Sunday mornings, and that's it. They don't look outside of their buildings.
Their Christian bubble.
Their Christian bubble.
Gonna pop that.
I think if we loved everyone, if we had compassion for everyone, I think if we constantly helped everyone like that in the way that Jesus did, and then when people actually came to us, and in the same way that Jesus did, we challenged them, not like judged them, but challenged them, then I think we would have a better Christianity within this country.
Wow, thank you for those awesome words, Darren. Thank you also for Carl and for Amos for those tweets as well. So we have only a few minutes till the show ends. I can't believe how fast it's gone. That's right, it is nearly time to go. This is Awkward, the show that gives honest answers to awkward questions. And I want to give a shout out to Dee, who is revising for your test tomorrow. I hope it goes really well. She says, I'm loving the show. I totally agree that we love to live in our Christian bubble and talk about everything but God. But she says, I feel like 90% could do more. It is finding the opportunities to do so. Also, she said it's about being true to yourself. And if someone is meant to hear about the word, then the opportunity will arise. We can talk about God everywhere. We just need to find that confidence that God has in us and God has already given us. So easier said than done. So thank you for that comment. But we've actually got to go now because it's time for Promo Gospel Presents. So Darren, so great having the studio.
Yeah, it's brilliant.
How do you want to sum things up?
Well, I just want to encourage people to leave and have young people experience and know and discover the gospel for themselves. We can't just keep feeding them all the time. At some point, we've all got to grow up. We've all got to know how to find our own answers in that, and we can't be frightened of what people discover and what people think. For me, as long as they believe in God, as long as they believe in Jesus, and they expect the Holy Spirit to live inside them, then that's all that matters. At the end of the day, the theology that they come up with, then we need to allow that space. We need to allow them to be open to find and discover it for themselves.
So thank you so much for sharing your wisdom, Darren. So how can we get in touch with Message to the Masses? Where do we go from here?
Yeah, you can obviously go to messagetomasses.com, but look out and watch on the website for in a month's time or so, as we'll be releasing our profiles, and we want young people to be able to sign up to that, because we want their gospel to be online. We want their testimony to be online. The most important and most powerful evangelism tool that we have is our testimony, and so if we can have that online, then that would be a great thing. And what it will allow is our friends to read our testimony and then to ask questions for themselves for the rest of the Message to the Masses. So we're hoping that it's going to be a fantastic tool to use in evangelism.
Well, thank you so much, Darren. It's been great having you in the studio. So again, like Darren said, log on to messagetothemasses.com, all one word, or search Message to the Masses on Facebook or at Masses Speak Out on Twitter.